Hey guys, the Wood Craftsman here. I'm going to be drawing a kitchen here in the Mozaik software, and what I wanted to really showcase in this video was actually the rendering that Mozaik has released in their latest version 14 release. At the time of this video, this version was in beta still, but from what I've seen with a day or two of messing around with it, it actually works very smoothly. But again, the biggest thing I wanted to show in this video is actually its new rendering capabilities compared to their previous rendering. So I will probably do a time lapse of the kitchen drawing itself. There's been some changes in the software itself as far as within the program, as far as some of the parameters and the textures and things like that. I won't really get into that. I'll probably maybe do a separate video on that, but there's also assuming other content creators that will do the same thing. But I really wanted to show the rendering side of this because it's a massive improvement from where it was. So without further ado, I'm going to get into this, and like I said, I'll just probably do a time lapse on this. It was about right here that I realized that I had the textures set up incorrectly for this job. Traditionally, I'd be doing a birch interior. In this case, it'd be an oak exterior, but for some reason, I had set all of the textures for all the components to oak. So I'm just going through here and changing them. This was one of the massive changes that Mozaik talked about in their pre-launch videos about why they did it and how they did it. It is a little bit of a pain up front, but I think once you get used to it, it'll be a lot more easier to control, especially in your 3D renderings, which was kind of the whole purpose of why they did it like this here. Okay, I just thought I'd stop and talk about this here. I'm going to go into 3D view. As you saw, I kind of struggled with the cutout for the sink. And it turned out to be, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's just maybe a bug in version 14, but normally by default, when you replace the top, as you saw, it showed that when it talked about the sink cutout, it asked me for the setback, the overlay, and the radius. But there's a box in the very top that says no cutout with a check mark in it. By default, that used to be unchecked, so that means it would cut out the sink, and that's why I couldn't get these numbers to show up here. Every time I would like re-click on it here and regenerate cutouts, nothing would happen. And the reason nothing would happen is because for whatever reason that default now changed to no cutout. So if you're seeing that, make sure you uncheck that box. One of the things that I do when I'm getting close to the end of drawing a job or a revision or whatever the case may be is I'll open up the 3D viewer and I'll do like a walkthrough visual to verify that I have all the finished ends in place, all the panelized ends, making sure that I'm not missing anything, making sure that I've got all the styles to the floor, things like that. In this case here, I happen to notice the refrigerator cabinet actually had what looked like unfinished ends. Turned out to be that in the textures area, I had the wrong material selected with the wrong texture. And then to top it all off, I actually selected the wrong material with the right texture, and I haven't changed it again. So that's why I always go through and do a walkthrough and make the changes as necessary. So this gives you an idea of what it looks like in the 3D viewer, but this isn't fully rendered yet. This is just your basic rendering. And for a fair amount of clients, this would probably be just fine. But we're going to take this to the next step. So before I do that, I'm just going to kind of finalize it a little bit. Kind of move things around a little bit. I'm going to save this view. I'm just going to call it 1. It's important to name it. And then if you want to look at a different view, you can, rotate it and then click the save button. It's going to ask you for a new one. Nice thing is though too is if you say you update this, you can actually just, if you say for example if this is a view you like but you made some changes to it, instead of having to give it a new name, you can click on update and then make sure if there's more here to choose from, you select whichever scene you're updating and click OK. Alright, we're going to add some base molding here quick. And I'm going to go to a saved view. Alright. I had light fixtures in the other one, but I have not figured out how to turn the lights on yet. So we're going to skip that in this one, but normally I would have some ceiling pot lights in here. But we're just going to keep it all that for the time being to move on to the actual rendering side of things. So I think we are ready to render. One thing I wanted to point out before you get into the rendering, going back to these texture settings, if you go into textures now, so materials has its textures assigned to it, and then you have other textures that aren't necessarily cabinet textures. You have your wall, floor, windows and doors. I should change this to white. If you have any masonry of any kind, I've already changed the ceiling color. I'm going to keep the hardware color as black. But these are your appliances, and I like to change the appliance to the brushed. I think it gives a little better look. Mozaik has really done a big change on why are we doing this here? On their appliances. So, or on their textures, I should say. So one of the things that you have to keep in mind is that they've isolated and separated a bunch of textures, versus before you'd have to kind of go do it in SketchUp. But one thing I wanted to point out here is prior to version 14, Mozaik used to separate textures by cabinet exterior, drawer front door, I think it was wall door, base door, things like that. And then you also had molding textures. So it used to be that you'd have separate textures that had horizontal grain and separate textures that had vertical grain. And it was always frustrating because whenever I develop a new texture, I'd also have to develop a horizontal texture. And if I wasn't careful, I would mess up the vertical texture in the process. So one thing that they've done now is there's a little button on here called Set Up Textures. So they've got it basically by floor, wall, and then graphic. Graphic is everything that doesn't fit in the floor and wall. And so this is everything. This is wall, like all your wall paint colors, your wood textures, countertop textures. It's all in here. So there's a bunch in here to start with, but if you're finding that, and I could be misspeaking on this, but it's working for me, when you have your countertop, for example, and you go to the rendering and see your countertop doesn't have a sheen to it, there's a good chance it's because it's not in this graphic list and you haven't assigned the sheen to it. So I've already assigned a bunch of basically from Cambria all the way down here, ones I've already signed, and I've assigned the sheen to them. And then if you need to rotate the grain for whatever reason, there's an option here to rotate as well. So it's really important that to get your textures right, you have to assign a gloss to them. And it basically, you know, this one here, for example, you can go none, flat, satin, semi-gloss, high gloss, and then there's for your glass texture. And when you look at when it says flat or satin, semi-gloss, and gloss, I'm finding that if I need to have something that looks like what we produce in the shop, which is a 20-degree sheen in our cabinetry, typically that'd be called a satin, or maybe even a flat. But to get the look of it, I'm actually having to go into semi-gloss. And then on the countertops, you know, normally they're a semi-gloss to high gloss. I've been doing high gloss, and it shows the gloss pretty good, but it's maybe not as glossy as what it should be. But again, that's all with lighting as well. So maybe that once I get the lights figured out, that'll change. So anyways, where I was getting with that is anytime if you have a texture, I'm going to cancel this. I didn't make any changes. If you go into your materials again and you have these different textures, and say for example in these here I selected that CE PS Oak 1001, I want to make sure that in the setup textures that I have that listed as well, and I have a sheen associated to it. So these are sorted basically how they're entered. And right here I have the CE Oak PS 101, which is the color I'm using this here. I have it set to semi-gloss. So if I wanted to change the sheen, I would do that here. Okay, I think we're ready to go into the rendering here. So I'm just going to go in the products. I'm going to go into 3D. I'm going to go and choose my preset that I've already done. If you go over here in this corner, you have these 3D settings. Now I pretty much have these saved for defaults, but one of the things that David Carr had showed on Mozaik was to have this HDR set maxed out. And HDR is high definition. I'll put it, you know what it is. I don't remember what, something. It's index rendering, high definition rendering index, and basically it's an image that you put in the background here, and basically you're putting this whole image in the center of a sphere. So it's kind of almost like a panoramic that connects from 0 degrees to 360 all the way around. And the HDR image, they have a default one. I've actually downloaded a couple as well from a website. But what I've been finding is that using just the default one and then overlaying an image behind it after it's done. Because if you have, in the rendering side of this, if you have it where it says it's transparent, it'll just be white in the background. And then later on, you can overlay this image over another image to kind of give you a different appearance.
Many hours later.
Alright, where we left off, I was struggling very badly with the rendering on this because I was trying to do something in the video that I should have tested out beforehand. So I'm going to go back into the 3D rendering here. I'm going to show you a couple of things that I have learned. So I'm going to go back to my first view that I saved. This is the one we developed in the beginning of the video. And one of the things I've learned is I'm going to go into the settings here, and I pretty much have all these settings the way I think that the drawing looks the best. But I have learned though that these numbers here have a little bit of an impact on this view, even though I'm using the default HDR and I'm using a transparent mode. But let me show you what I'm talking about here. So basically if you turn this brightness down to 0, this is going to turn black, and when you render your image, the only light you're going to have is basically coming through the window. So I've played around with these numbers, and for this particular drawing, the 1.0 on brightness seems to basically have the best impact on overall quality of the image. So that's the one thing I wanted to keep. The next thing is, what I want to do is I want to find a way to save this image without having to rename it later when it's in the folder. So what I've learned is if I save this, and if I call it a name right now, I'm going to call this the actual job name. Okay, so it's Rev 0 and it is a 3D. I'm going to click OK. Now we're going to go into the rendering, and I'm just going to check my rendering settings here. Exposure 1.35 seems to be working well, so we're going to keep that. Now I'm going to click on this image because this is the one I just saved, and I'm going to render this. And what I've learned is rendering goes a lot quicker if you don't have an HDRI image in the background. And like I said, I've found a way to actually put an image behind this image because it's a PNG image. We're going to start downloading here probably the next 10 seconds or so. Usually once it gets to about 85% roughly, it'll start downloading. I'm just basing off of this percentage what I think it is. Here we go, we're downloading. Alright, so this is the one we just did, and if you use these arrows, it'll actually click back and forth to the other one, and they're exactly the same. I just want to make sure that I could repeat it. I think there was a subtle difference. Nope. Alright, so being that this one's highlighted, if I save, let's see here, save current view, I believe I should be able to select it here. Click OK. Now when I want to export, I'm going to save image. It should be saved how I named it this way here. So we're going to click Save Images. I'm going to save it to the libraries here in Pictures, like that. Click OK. Save images successful. Now, if I go into right here, so one thing that it didn't do was, actually, let me redo this. We're going to delete this because that was saved when I was off of working off camera. We're going to delete that. Let's do this again here. We're going to click, we're just going to export it now. This video is totally unscripted, by the way. Now, if I, there we go. And open it up. There it is. Now, as I mentioned, here is, you can look through the window, and it's grayed out, and that's because it's a PNG image. So this is basically, it's no background behind this window. It shows up as white in the software, but when you download this or export this, you're going to see that this is basically, this is black or going to be dark. Like I said, if you overlay this image here over an image in the background, so this would be your secondary image, you would actually get to see, you know, whatever that image is behind there. So I'll pop up an image here of what it looks like after I've done that. But I don't know of an app that I have on my computer that can do it. I don't know if it's something I can do in Paint or not, but I do have an app on my phone called InShot, and that allows me to start out with the first image, which would be basically the tree background, or maybe it's a street background, and then I can overlay this as a picture-in-picture on top of that. So, but anyways, that's kind of what version 14 is about. Like I said, this rendering aspect is a huge impact and improvement over what they've had in the past. I would get image quality like this here, similar to this, by importing the drawing into SketchUp and then using aerial vision to do the rendering. The one thing I'm really excited to see how to do is how to be able to turn under on under cabinet lighting, because in the original kitchen I drew, it was just like this. I actually had ceiling lights. They had the pot lights here. I didn't do them in this one here because they won't turn on right now anyways, but as Mozaik gets deeper and deeper into this version 14, I know they'll have more and more videos out, and I'm assuming that they're going to be going over ceiling and under cabinet lighting, which will be really excited to share with you guys as well. So until now, I hope you guys enjoy the video. Questions and comments are welcome. Thanks for watching.